The dome hummed faintly overhead, a gentle atmospheric correction pulse brushing Jalen's scalp like a mother's sigh. Rows of carnivorous orchids blinked lazily in their bioglass terrariums. One of them sneezed. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his regulation lab coat and muttered something that was either a curse or a prayer, depending on how much of his breakfast had been vaporized. Day 182, he dictated to his recorder chip. Still no sign of mutual respect between me and the flora. Current theory, the moss is mocking me. Note to self, stop telling it your secrets. He hadn't planned on falling in love. He really hadn't planned on falling in love with someone who had ears like sculpted obsidian and the emotional warmth of a tax audit. But there she was, 3 biodomes down, elbows deep in a vat of humming soil, muttering to herself in Varelian. The language was mostly consonants, interspersed with what sounded like someone gargling a flute. It was objectively the most beautiful thing Jalen had ever heard. Elun didn't know he existed. Not really. Oh, sure, they'd spoken. She'd corrected his pronunciation of fermentation pod with the same casual disdain one might reserve for someone who said espresso. But most of their interactions consisted of her arching a single long eyebrow and walking away, while Jalen flailed through sentences like a malfunctioning greeting bot. He told himself he liked it that way. Unreachable women with terrifying intellects and ambiguous motives. Right in his wheelhouse. It was safer when she didn't look directly at him. Her eyes made him feel like a software update pretending it was a person. He was alone in the dome, mostly. One of the maintenance drones floated by, whistling a tune that suspiciously resembled the Star Wars Cantina song, but in 5/4 time. Jalen leaned against a workbench, watching Elun through the glass partition. Her silver braid bounced with each precise movement as she transplanted a sentient fern into a nutrient pod shaped like a teacup. The fern gave her a thumbs up. Jalen whispered the thought without meaning to. A stupid, quiet, wistful thing. I wonder if she'd marry me. The glass didn't distort her reaction. She turned, slowly, deliberately. Her face was unreadable. The kind of unreadable that made you feel like your brain had just requested a diagnostic. She stepped closer, eyes locked on his, long ears twitching once. And then she said, in perfectly enunciated Terran standard, yes. Jalen did not move. His internal organs performed a flash mob of uncertainty. The air in the dome grew 3 degrees warmer, or maybe he was spontaneously combusting. The maintenance drone did a double take and flew into a light fixture. What? Jalen's voice cracked like a bad encryption key. Yes, she repeated. You asked. I answered. It wasn't a real, that was just a thought. A hypothetical, a micro-whim. She tilted her head. You vocalized it. I didn't think anyone would hear. You were 5 meters from my auditory membrane. Still, she took a slow breath, as if consulting an invisible rulebook. Per Section 7G of the Intergalactic Social Conduct Protocol, all verbalized partnership inquiries within jurisdictional biodome environments are binding pending mutual acknowledgement. You're joking. Her face didn't change. Varelians lack the facial musculature for that level of deception. He blinked. So, we're engaged? I believe the Terran term is prenuptially entangled. No, I didn't sign anything. You don't need to. This dome is under treaty-affirmed observational law. Your words were recorded. Oh, no. You may submit a counterstatement if you believe your intention was misrepresented. Yes, that. I'd like to do that. I already filed the confirmation with my legal AI. Nullification will require a 37-form application and 2 weeks of mediation. You already filed? You paused for longer than 0.8 seconds. That constitutes implied consent under Varelian engagement norms. Jalen sat down on the bench. A carnivorous orchid leaned toward him with sympathy or hunger. I'm going to be fired. Unlikely. The intergalactic concord encourages species integration. This may qualify you for a promotion. He stared at her. Do you even want to marry me? Her ears twitched again. I'm open to the experience. That's not exactly comforting. I find comfort to be a poor metric for compatibility. She turned to leave. Halfway to the exit, she paused. We will need to begin the compatibility trial within the week. The what? She looked over her shoulder. It simulates 73 probable domestic scenarios and measures psychological harmonics. That sounds horrible. It is mandatory. She left without another word. Jalen turned to the maintenance drone, which had recovered and was now humming Bohemian Rhapsody in Gregorian chant. Well, he said, I guess I'm getting married. The drone blinked a heart-shaped light. Don't look at me like that, he muttered. It's not like I meant it. From the far end of the dome, a speaker crackled. It was the station's AI, Mona, who sounded like a chain-smoking librarian and had no patience for romantic nonsense. Reminder, she said, the next shuttle to Earth departs in 72 hours. If you plan to fake your death and flee the jurisdiction, now's your window. Jalen leaned back, closed his eyes, and whispered, I was just talking to myself. Mona replied, next time, try thinking quieter. The orchid sneezed again. The orientation pamphlet was titled, So You Accidentally Got Engaged to a Varelian, a cross-species commitment guide for the anxiously Terran. Jalen was on page 4 and already regretting every life choice that had brought him to this moment, including but not limited to applying for the off-world anthropologist internship, drinking 3 cups of protein sludge the morning of orientation, and, most importantly, thinking out loud near a woman whose ears could pick up a whisper from across a canyon. He glanced across the communal biodome cafeteria. Elune was eating something that looked like neon pasta and made an audible purring noise every time she chewed. She looked utterly serene, not happy, not smug, just at peace, like someone who had finally ticked off accidentally agree to marry a human on their cosmic bucket list. Jalen shoved the pamphlet into his pocket and took a bite of his lunch. It fought back. He pressed his communicator. Mona, is it legal for the cafeteria protein to be sentient? The station AI sighed. Technically, yes. Ethically, debatable. But in fairness, it did sign a waiver. Jalen grimaced as the protein blob made a sad honking noise. He stood up, tray in hand, and made his way over to Elune, who looked up without surprise as if she'd already calculated the exact second he'd approach. Your nutrient cluster appears distressed, she said. It insulted my taste in shirts. A display of sentience. Impressive. May I eat it? He blinked. You eat sentient food? I find moral ambiguity stimulates digestion. He handed her the tray. It's yours. She plucked a fork from her sleeve. Where had she been hiding that? And began eating with clinical enthusiasm. Jalen sat. So, engagement. Yes, she said, chewing. It is proceeding. I've received 7 emails, 2 interstellar pings, and a bouquet from a Varelian matchmaking committee called Bound by Bioluminescence. One of the flowers tried to mate with me. Compliment accepted. I also got a notification that we're scheduled for compatibility testing starting tomorrow. She nodded. Yes, the simulation module will initiate a 36-hour immersive trial within the Concord's neuroharmonic coexistence sphere. It replicates common partnership stressors. Stressors, joint budgeting, cohabitation in environments of artificial gravity, parental interference, in-laws. He blanched. You have in-laws? Not personally, but the simulation believes in comprehensive suffering. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Alone? Are you sure you want to go through with this? She tilted her head. Would you prefer a formal dissolution request? Maybe. I don't know. You just seem alarmingly okay with all of this. She paused. Jalen, Varelian emotional processing is nonlinear. What appears as calm may be disassociation or digestion. Difficult to say. That's oddly reassuring. She placed her fork down. You are not obligated to continue. A mutual retraction clause can be invoked if we agree on emotional misalignment. Do you think we're emotionally misaligned? She considered. You experience chronic anxiety. I find it intriguing. I'm not sure that's a healthy basis for a lifelong partnership. She stood. Let us test the hypothesis. They walked side by side through the corridor toward the simulation wing. Jalen noticed, not for the first time, that Elune walked like gravity had to politely ask her permission before existing. Her long ears twitched occasionally, as if tuning into frequencies no human had the range to hear. At the simulation door, a holographic display blinked awake. A cartoon bird with cybernetic wings chirped, "Welcome to the Harmony Dome trademark. Please enjoy your immersive compatibility assessment. Today's theme, emotionally charged breakfast conversations," Jalen muttered. "I already failed that this morning." The door hissed open. They were immediately in a cozy kitchen. A simulated sun beamed through synthetic windows. The walls were decorated with framed motivational quotes in languages neither of them spoke. A pot of simulated coffee was brewing, and there was a table set for two. A prompt appeared above the table. Day 3 of cohabitation. Discuss holiday plans without triggering existential meltdown. Jalen sat. "Okay, easy. I say Earth. You say Varelia. We compromise with a neutral asteroid resort. Varelian holidays involve silent meditation and recreational silence. Earth holidays involve shouting, food comas, and pretending to like your relatives. Perhaps we should celebrate on alternating planetary cycles." "That's actually a pretty good idea." The simulation buzzed. Emotional compromise accepted. Another prompt appeared. "Your simulated offspring wants to quit interstellar flute school. Discuss." Jalen blinked. "Wait, we have a kid in this simulation?" A 10-year-old blob of translucent light floated into the room, humming scales and looking sad. "I want to be a combat botanist." Elin crouched beside it. "Follow your heart, but practice flute one more year. Plant grenades can wait." The blob nodded solemnly and floated away. Jalen whispered, "I'm concerned by how good you are at that." Elin straightened. "I raised several feral spores during my academic training." An alarm went off. "In-law visit imminent. Hide your weirdness." The room shimmered. Two massive Varelians with glowing eyebrows and suspiciously judgmental glances phased into existence. "Hello," boomed the male. "Is this your human?" "Yes," said Elun. The female glared. "It is small." "I am present," Jalen offered. "He speaks," the male noted, unimpressed. Jalen smiled. "So, any advice for a first-time interspecies son-in-law?" The male leaned in. "Sleep lightly." The simulation ended. The kitchen dissolved. They stood in the blank white room of the simulation exit chamber, the cartoon bird reappearing. "Trial complete. Compatibility score, 72%. Recommended. Proceed with caution, but optimism." Ellen turned to him. "That's a passing grade." "Barely." She offered him a small nod. "Would you like to try again tomorrow?" "I'd rather be insulted by your imaginary parents again. They were based on real people." "I'm honored." As they walked back toward the residential quarters, Jalen found himself laughing. It was absurd. It was surreal. It was possibly the beginning of a diplomatic incident. But it was also strangely fun. Elun glanced at him. "Your laugh is inefficient, but functional." "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." "Do not let it go to your head." "Too late," he grinned. "I'm already imagining our next imaginary child." She raised an eyebrow. "May it be less musically inclined." "Deal." The invitation arrived via a swarm of glittering data beetles that flew directly into Jalen's cereal and arranged themselves into a message on the table. "Congratulations. You have been selected for accelerated pre-bond emotional calibration training. Report to the NeuroSync Theater immediately. Dress warmly. Bring snacks." He looked at Elun, who was serenely drinking something that smoked slightly and smelled like electromagnetic fields. She glanced at the beetles and raised one eyebrow, which in Virelian culture apparently meant, "Of course this is happening. Why are you surprised?" "Are you also invited?" he asked. "I designed the calibration program," she said. "It is controversial." "Why?" "It contains truth." "That's deeply unsettling." They arrived at the NeuroSync Theater 20 minutes later, where a robotic usher with 4 legs and an accent that sounded suspiciously like a French chef scanned their irises and handed them neural caps made from something disturbingly moist. The usher bowed. "Enjoy your confrontation with unresolved emotional patterns." "I was really hoping for popcorn," Jalen whispered. The neural caps suctioned onto their heads. The lights dimmed. A countdown began in a voice that sounded like an old divorce lawyer reciting poetry. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to your inner horrorscape. The world melted. Jalen found himself in a small apartment on Earth, one he hadn't seen in years. His mother was making tea in the kitchen, humming the same off-key lullaby she used to when he was sick. Except she was 8 feet tall, glowing faintly blue, and had 6 arms. He turned to Ellen, who stood beside him, wearing a t-shirt that read, "My fiancé survived a psychic simulation, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt." "Is this my brain or your?" he asked. "Yours," she said. "But my fashion sense has invaded." The scene shifted. Now they stood in a conference room filled with every person who had ever rejected Jalen in any context. High school crushes, scholarship boards, even the barista who once said, "I'm sorry, we're out of dignity today." The barista waved. A booming voice echoed, "Trial 1, relational self-doubt. Please proceed." Jalen cleared his throat. "Okay, great. We're doing this. Just me, a parade of rejection, and my alien fiancé. Nothing weird about this." Ellen surveyed the room. "Which one traumatized you the most?" He pointed at a tall figure in the corner. "That's Kevin. He told me I'd never get published." She walked up to Kevin and, without ceremony, flicked his forehead. Kevin exploded into glitter. "I feel both better and itchy," Jalen said. "Next." The room dissolved. They were now inside a zero-gravity love hotel orbiting a gas giant. A neon sign blinked in and out. Trial 2. Future projection fear response. A baby floated by. It had Jalen's nose and Alun's unsettlingly calm expression. The AI voice returned. "You must now respond to 147 consecutive hypothetical scenarios involving financial instability, cross-species misunderstandings, and shared dental insurance." "Kill me," Jalen whispered. "Too late to opt out," Ellen said, grabbing a data tablet. "First scenario, our child wants to marry a sentient mushroom. Thoughts? Are we assuming the mushroom is emotionally mature?" Standard assumption. "Then, I support their choice, unless it's part of a mycelial hive mind." She nodded. "Good. Flexibility. Second scenario, I become a galactic outlaw due to a lab accident involving illegal pollen. Do you testify against me?" "Absolutely not, but I reserve the right to write a best-selling memoir later." Spiteful, practical, attractive. Scenario after scenario played out, growing more surreal by the minute. At one point, they were forced to co-host a reality cooking show on Mars. Another involved their consciousnesses being swapped for 48 hours. During that one, Jalen forgot to blink for so long that Ellen, in his body, had to manually restart his tear ducts. Eventually, the simulation darkened. The voice returned, softer. Final trial. Mutual vulnerability. They stood in an empty white space. A single door appeared between them, labeled True Intention. Elun looked at him. "You first." He hesitated. "What happens if we open it?" "We see the part of us we most try to hide." "Oh, good. Nothing terrifying about that." Jalen reached for the handle. The room filled with the echo of his thoughts. Hundreds of them, flying through the air like translucent scrolls. Most were harmless. What if I forget her birthday? What if I fart in my sleep? But a few cut deep. She's too smart for me. She'll leave eventually. This isn't real. He stepped back, trembling. Ellen stepped forward. Her scrolls floated out next. They were colder, sharper. "I do not understand love. I am not made for softness. I fear I will dissect him with logic until he disappears." They stood in silence. Then Jalen laughed. "You dissect me with logic daily, but I keep showing up." Ellen gave a rare smile. "You are stubborn. You're impossible. That is my appeal." The simulation shimmered. Neural integration, complete. Compatibility rating, adjusted 85%. The caps disengaged. The theater lights came back on. Jalen exhaled. "Well, that was the worst date I've ever had." Ellen stretched her neck. "I have seen worse. I once dated a temporal archaeologist who kept forgetting which year we were in." They stepped into the corridor, heads buzzing with memory residue and simulated revelations. "Do you feel Closer? Jalen asked. I feel more accurately calibrated. I'll take that as affection. I intended it as such. They walked in silence for a bit until Jalen asked, So what now? We wait. The final review must be submitted to the Intergalactic Union for emotional authenticity. That's a real thing? It's staffed entirely by retired therapists and malicious poets. Of course it is. As they entered the lift, Jalen looked at her sideways. You still want to marry me? She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, Let's see if the poets approve first. Jalen awoke to the sound of interspecies wedding music, an unsettling blend of electric cello, throat singing, and whatever noise a bored whale makes when it's feeling theatrical. The melody was coming from inside his pillow. He slapped it. The pillow moaned in disappointment and stopped. He sat up, hair sticking in 17 different gravitational directions, and blinked at the holographic message floating above his bed. Preliminary approval. Union registry update. Pending below that, another line blinked. Note, one or more emotional statements may have been flagged for poetic fraud. You have been summoned. Bring evidence of sincerity, preferably in physical or metaphorical form. Jalen rubbed his eyes. Mona, he said aloud, did I just get accused of emotional plagiarism? The station A, I crackled. You used a quote from a Terran romantic holodrama during your final simulation. The poets are not pleased. It was contextually relevant. Your context is not their concern. He found Alun already awake, standing on the ceiling. She was sipping from a mug labeled May Contain Multiverses, her long ears slightly tilted in what he now recognized as morning annoyance. They summoned us, she said. I didn't even know emotional fraud was a thing. It is only enforced by the Department of Symbolic Authenticity, but their punishments are metaphorically severe. What does that even mean? They send you a metaphor so devastatingly personal, it collapses your neural confidence structure. He opened his mouth, closed it again. By midday, they were floating in the orbital chamber of sincere intent, a spherical room lined with mirrors that reflected not appearances, but self-concepts. Jalen caught sight of one reflection, showing him confidently giving a speech at a wedding. Another had him hiding behind a plant. The poets arrived. There were 3 of them, draped in robes made of shifting phrases, their bodies semi-translucent and covered in what appeared to be literal wordplay. The lead poet's robe currently read, Love is a recursive algorithm that breaks when observed too closely. You stand accused, intoned the lead poet, of performing sincerity without internal congruence. I don't even know what that means, Jalen blurted. That is unfortunate, said the second poet. Their robe read, Affection is not a tax deduction. Lund stepped forward, calm as ever. If he is guilty of anything, it is excessive overthinking. The third poet leaned forward. Let us probe. A beam of violet light shot from the ceiling and connected to Jalen's forehead. His thoughts began projecting into the space around them, like dream videos queued up by an over-enthusiastic algorithm. First came a memory, him watching Ellen from across the biodome, trying to work up the courage to ask her what her third favorite molecule was. Then another, pacing in his quarters, rehearsing an apology in case he'd offended her with the word nice. The final projection showed a silent moment, days ago, when Alun had fallen asleep beside him during a forced meditation simulation. He hadn't moved for hours, afraid to wake her. The projection lingered. The lead poet raised a hand. There is awkwardness, but there is truth. I don't have big speeches, Jalen muttered, or fancy declarations. But I didn't fake anything. I'm terrified, and she knows that. I think that counts. The second poet nodded. Terror is a flavor of sincerity. The third poet whispered, We shall bestow the metaphor. A scroll floated down between them, unfolding in the air. It read, Love is a hallway with infinite doors. Only those who stop knocking and begin building stay long enough to find out which one's open. Jalen blinked. That's actually kind of beautiful. It will follow you forever, the lead poet said. Try not to disappoint it. The poets vanished in a puff of symbolic condensation. Alun tilted her head. You did well. I was sweating through my DNA. You were honest. I was desperate. That too. They exited the chamber just as a message blinked into their vision. Final approval pending formal declaration of intent. Please submit statement in public forum. Minimum witnesses, 12. Maximum embarrassment, unspecified. Jalen stared. I have to say it, out loud, in front of people. Yes, Ellen said. That is the Varelian way. Of course it is. They scheduled the declaration for the following day in the Central Station atrium, a space designed for diplomatic announcements, art installations, and apparently emotional exposure. A crowd gathered, fellow researchers, curious Varelians, a few sentient plants, and at least one sentient spreadsheet who'd come for the emotional metrics. Jalen stepped forward. A floating microphone hovered near his face. It smelled faintly of commitment. He looked at Alun. Her face was as unreadable as always, but her ears were tilted slightly back. That, he learned, was her version of anticipation. He took a breath. I don't know how to do this right, he said, and maybe that's the point. Love isn't an experiment you finish. It's one you keep messing up until the variables stop fighting you. He glanced around. I didn't plan for any of this. I was supposed to study alien behavior, not fall in love with someone who makes me question the physics of my own heart. There was a quiet murmur. A few Varelians hummed approvingly. The spreadsheet shed a tiny data tear. I don't know what marriage looks like between us, but I want to find out. He looked at Alun. If you still mean yes. I do, Alun stepped forward. I still mean yes. A hush fell. Then the lights dimmed. The atrium's ceiling opened to show the stars. A bonding beam of soft bioluminescent light bathed them, signaling formal recognition. Jalen turned to her. So, we're really doing this. Apparently, she said, a beat of silence. Want to go get matching tattoos? I was thinking matching neural upgrades. Even better. The wedding didn't happen all at once. It began with a scheduling conflict. The intergalactic Concorde's only available officiator, a part-time justice drone named Una 5, had accidentally double-booked Jalen and Alun's ceremony with a minor diplomatic summit between two warring gelatinous species. For 23 hours, their wedding was officially listed as pending due to potential slime aggression. By the time the paperwork cleared, the atrium had been reconfigured into a cross-species ceremonial platform. Hover chairs floated in neat concentric rings. Guests arrived in every imaginable shape, and a disembodied voice narrated everything in 8 languages, including interpretive scent. Eluan wore a sleeveless unity cloak patterned with fractal constellations. Jalen wore a slightly panicked expression and a collar that kept adjusting its own symmetry. Every time he tried to fix it, it smugly unfolded itself into a slightly worse version. You look geometrically appropriate, Ellen said. You look like a galaxy that figured out sarcasm, Jalen replied. Una 5 floated to center stage, blinking in an official sort of way. Designated bond candidates, please step into the fusion circle. They obeyed. A subtle hum passed through the air. Spectral rings encircled them, designed to project shared intent. Jalen watched his own thoughts flicker into the field. Alun's face, his own reflection looking braver than he felt, the memory of that first ridiculous whisper. Beside him, Ellen's projections appeared. Rows of data scrolls, bioluminescent vines, and, to his surprise, an image of him, asleep, mouth slightly open, holding a book titled Alien Love Languages for Nervous Terrans. May I speak first? Ellen asked. Please, he said. I'm statistically more likely to faint afterward. She turned slightly to address the guests. When I first encountered Jalen, I assumed he was a mild atmospheric disturbance with eyebrows. Over time, I concluded he was sentient, if poorly calibrated. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. But he is honest in the way that most species attempt to simulate. He apologizes before he offends me, and sometimes after. He listens even when he does not understand. He panics often. He recovers more slowly. I find this endearing, and maddening, and fascinating. I accept him. Una 5 beeped solemnly. Declaration of intent received. Partner 1. Calibrated. Jalen cleared his throat. Okay, hi. He heard his own voice crack through the sound system and winced. I didn't think anyone would ever say yes to me. Not in the way Alun did, without hesitation, without pretense. Even when I panicked. Even when I messed up a dozen times in a row. He paused, then smiled faintly. I used to think love was this huge, dramatic thing. Fireworks, betrayals, running through airports. But Alun showed me that sometimes it's just being willing to learn another person's logic, even if that logic involves spore etiquette and weaponized orchids. A quiet snort came from the second row. Jalen suspected it was the sentient spreadsheet. He continued, I didn't know if I was ready for this, for her. But then I realized, no one's ready for the universe. You just show up. You try. You stay. I want to stay. Una 5 emitted a small celebratory chime. Declaration accepted. Partner 2, emotionally volatile but compatible. Fusion ceremony complete. From above, an orbital satellite released a burst of soft light shaped like interwoven helixes. The crowd stood, hovered, oozed, or flickered, depending on biology, and let out various sounds of joy. The sentient plant threw pollen confetti. Someone's translator misfired and shouted Mezeltov in Klingon. Later during the reception, which involved 3 separate gravitational settings and 1 interpretive dance performed entirely by drones, Jalen found Alun on the observation deck, watching a binary star system pulse slowly against the black. He slid beside her. Did we just become an interstellar cultural symbol? Yes, she said. There is already a meme. It is moderately flattering. Do I want to see it? No. They stood in comfortable silence. You know, Jalen said, I think I might finally be starting to understand you. That would be unfortunate, Ellen replied. I was hoping to remain mysterious until year 6. He laughed. I'll try to forget everything by then. You'll forget anyway. True. She turned to face him. Are you happy? He thought for a long moment. Thought about the path that had led him here. The simulations, the metaphorical interrogations, the unsolicited therapy from poets, the deep fear that he was just some flawed human flailing through other people's clarity. Then he looked at her. Not as a mystery, not as an alien, but as someone who, like him, was still figuring it out, moment by imperfect moment. I'm getting there, he said. Good, she replied. We have time. Behind them, the party glowed into the stars. 2 lives fused into something neither of them could have predicted, but both of them had chosen. Not because it was logical, not because it was safe, but because somehow, improbably, it made sense. Their kind of sense. The kind built from whispered maybes that turned into yes.